All right. Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And as we normally do, we had a really vibrant pregame. I wasn't the most upbeat of topics, I suppose, but the world's a crazy place right now, and I think that as always, we're going to try and share some experiences and maybe learn from it, and maybe somebody can get some assistance dealing with some challenging things. And what we came to in the spirit of our flywheel of life, the five areas of life, the center being the self, is this concept of fortitude, and then even further self fortitude. And I think, Jim, as I like to do, you've been kind enough to share the definition. Let me read the definition of
Mhm.
fortitude, and then let me read the definition of self fortitude, and I'll pass the mic over to you. So, fortitude is the courage to bear pain or adversity calmly and patiently. It's not just about being brave in a single moment, but about having the sustained strength to endure over time. And that's a nice transition into self fortitude, which I think internalizes the word fortitude. When you add the self prefix to fortitude, it emphasizes the internal, personal nature of that strength. So self fortitude essentially means internal strength. It's the personal strength of mind and emotional resilience that an individual cultivates within themselves. And there's more to it than that, but I think for our purposes, Jim, that might suffice, and maybe it triggers an idea or two for you.
Yeah, Mark, I appreciate you set that one up nicely. As we did in our pregame, we were talking about what's the topic for today, and you had asked me how things were going along, and I said, yeah, things are going along well. It's been kind of a difficult week because, yeah, 4 or 5 people very close to me are experiencing some very um, difficult circumstances in
Mm-hmm.
relationship to health. And one, um, I'll share that story with you in a minute. And then as I was following up with them and interacting with them, I was trying to think of a word that would explain what they're going through or what I witness. And so I came up with this word fortitude, which is, it's not a word I use very often. And then it was, as you described, it was interesting when you put self fortitude, which is part of our framework, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have every episode we stay within these 5 areas of our life. Of course, profession, our health, mental health, and physical health. We'll talk about that. Um, our relationship with others, money, and our worldview. And self is in the center. And when you put
Mm-hmm.
the word self in front of just about anything, does change the meaning. That's why
Mm-hmm.
our number one is self awareness, being self aware of what's going on. But when we put the word self in front of self fortitude, it also completely changed the meaning. And the conversation I had with one of these uh, individuals that I'm close to, it definitely helped them. They appreciated that because
Mm-hmm.
they're all looking for that. And another a quote I've heard recently about when you're experiencing some type of an illness, when you're experiencing that, but when you're healthy, you have hundreds of ideas and goals. When you're ill, you have one,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that one is just to get better. So you can see how your life in one moment just can change, right? So I'll give a couple examples. Like I mentioned, my mother's experiencing. She's been healthy all her life, but she had this tremendous pain in her back and neck, and just completely changed her personality. She's always so strong and tries to put her smiley face on in every situation. But wow, when you're in that kind of pain, you change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and then I have a cousin. His wife is experiencing cancer. It's kind of the same thing. So he's living through that process. And then another very very close friend had some stomach pain, and then now that's turned into some surgery and some other long term things. But the one that came up the most, and this is a colleague, so we have a weekly call, and we were speaking, and she had sent me an email the week before saying that she had a family emergency. She couldn't work on the project, which was fine. And then when we got on the call, she said, I said, "How things going? You know, is everything? I hope everything worked out." And she's pointing to she said, "I'm going to put something in the chat. I want you to read it." This is on the Zoom call. So she puts in the chat, and I read it. And at first I thought it was a hack or something. And it said, "My son committed suicide last week." And
Wow.
yeah, well, I was right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just remember, looking at the screen and was hoping that what I read was not true. And then I just looked at, we're on a Zoom call, and I looked at the screen and said, "I'm so sorry." And and then remember also realizing whatever I say, is probably something she's going to hold on to. So
Hmm.
my first thing is, hey, I don't want to mention her name, but forgive me for what I say, because it may be completely out of line. But I just want to share this with you because I happen to have three very, very good friends that have lost their son. And um, and I would just remember saying that he obviously there's something related to depression, right? So depression is what leads for somebody to go to the point where they don't want to be in the world anymore. And
Hmm.
my comment was, he he didn't want to be here, and he's in a better place. And I know that may come off wrong, but he is in a better place. And you never have to worry about him again. He's in a better place. And then I went on to say that how it was difficult to be a male right now. It is.
Yeah. Jim, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And as I said to you in the pregame, kudos to you for that opening line, which is "Forgive me for what I'm about to say," because who the hell knows what to say to that?
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
You can't possibly understand how somebody feels about that. Even
Mm-hmm.
if you have four friends that have experienced that, they're all going to
Mm-hmm.
change. They're all going to feel
That's right.
differently about that experience. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so personal. It's like, and not to be, because almost anything that I could say to that would be either, cliche or,
Mm-hmm.
not fair or, irresponsible or,
Mm-hmm.
but it really does remind me. And even though it's a cliche, it's really just smacks me in the face when and this is the second time I've heard this from you because we did this in the pregame.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not what happens to you. Life is how you respond to what
Yeah.
happens to you. And it's like, you can get some solace in that. I think it can piss you off,
Mm-hmm.
as true as it is, because it's like, that doesn't do anything for me right now. But if you can get there, whether it's days or weeks or months or years, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
it does become at some point how you react, because we've both seen people go into their own deep depression about that, or
Mm-hmm.
addiction or drugs or alcohol, whatever, in response to that. But
Mm-hmm.
God bless her. I hope she finds the ability to respond to that in a way that serves her and her family.
Yeah, and this is where fortitude comes in, right?
Yeah.
This is where you really have to reach deep to find the goodness in the world. And then share the conversation obviously went on. Then we had spoke a week after that, and turns out that what I said must have really touched her in the right way, not the wrong way, which is good because
Uh-huh.
she project that she worked on, she really focused on. I think she needed it as a distraction. And then the conversation did go where it turns out he was very caring, was trying to help everybody, and that's probably the problem. He was helping others and forgot to help himself, and
Mm.
as a result, he just no longer could cope with that and decide that. I used to believe that um, suicide was a very selfish act, and
Mm-hmm.
then now, especially, I don't know all the particulars of this because this is a colleague, right? This is not a family member, but I also believe at that point, uh, it was very unselfish. That he felt that he was doing this in an unselfish way. And again, Mark, it's something that very few have had to experience in life. You have, with your mother. So
Hmm.
I want to be as respectful as I can to this. But I do think uh, depression, mental health, and the ultimate, worst case outcome is suicide, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody has to process it differently, and I'm sure people are criticizing me right now and the meaning of life and that. But I do think there does come a point when people just don't want to be here. And and they feel like they're helping the world by not. And
Yeah.
is that
Yeah. I
is that
think that,
is that a
when you meant,
selfish act in your opinion, Mark, or is that an unselfish act?
on some level, I think it's semantics. I suppose you really need, to me, you really, because, all I can lean back on is my mom taking her own life, and it's not,
Mhm,
it's different. And I don't mean to minimize it at all, because it was
mhm,
painful and it was bad and it was sad and all those things.
mhm,
But I mean, it's so different than losing a child. I can only imagine.
mhm,
She was around for almost 80 years. She had a run.
mhm.
She decided that she didn't want to be here from physical maladies and some level of mental illness, I'm sure. But I
Mhm.
remember the chain of events in terms of the emotional processing of that, because she made me aware of what she was going to do, which
Yeah, I
really
remember you
pissed
sharing that with me. She was very
really pissed me
transparent
off.
about this. Yeah.
I got really angry, and to your point, all I saw was selfish. You're going to leave your grandkids behind. You're going to leave your children, but what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then that anger. Then after she passed, then there was a sense of relief, which also was
Interesting.
like
Hmm.
the guilt set in. I'm like, why are you feeling relief about this? That's bad. I'm like,
Yeah.
nah. And I talked to my sister about it. She goes, I feel guilty, but I feel relief. And I'm like, I get it. I get
Wow.
it, because she was becoming a burden with her sadness, a burden with her
Mhm.
complaints, a burden with her whining, and misery becomes a burden. And I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, well, and then, then it evolved, and now it's like, do I miss her? Sure. But she's in
Mhm.
a better place. She definitely is in a better place, because the place she was in here was not good for her. And
Well,
so,
thanks for sharing that for me. And I feel better about not having experienced somebody that I know that committed suicide. But yeah, like you said, the burden is a word that she just didn't want a burden. That's very unselfish. She
yeah.
felt that, and even again, I appreciate you and your sisters being transparent or honest with each other about, yeah, maybe this is better for her and for us because you don't have to worry about her. And that's really what I was trying to convey, right? He's in a better place. You never have to worry about him any ever again.
Yeah, and I
He,
think the other thing that, and I don't know what benefit this might bring to anyone else that, God bless them, has to go through this. Probably all of us in some capacity, in some
Mhm,
way. Then there was the whole process of like, well, what do we do with their stuff? What do we do with the estate? What do we do with the
mhm,
paperwork and the money or the
mhm,
paintings or the whatever? It's just like, okay, well, then for weeks, because my sister and I took that responsibility on ourselves, because it was Florida and we both were living in Florida at the time. So just from a logistics standpoint, we took everything and put it in the storage facility. And that was just delaying the inevitable, because then you had to go back to the storage facility when somebody wanted something, say, well, what do you want this? You want? And at the end, it was like we got rid of like 80% of her stuff, and then we just kind of donated everything else. And when the storage facility was empty and the key was turned back in, that was the final phase. It was like, okay, now I can let
mm.
myself emotionally process whatever comes next, because I don't have to be physically reminded of this obligation to
Interesting.
disseminate my mother's shit
Yeah.
anymore, you know? So it's just, I mean, and arguably that it never goes away completely, but hopefully
Mhm.
it moves from a place of tremendous pain to some level of consequence, or perhaps strength and fortitude that might allow you to help someone else at some point in time. I don't know. It's probably different for
Yeah. Well,
everybody.
let's break that down because that's what the self fortitude, again, internal strength, um, self reliance, and then inner resilience. So, but so we'll break these down. But I want to talk about briefly about also the my comment about it's difficult to be a male.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that. I believe, and again, I don't want to go too political or get too out of off topic, but but I do think we've entered this moment in time where being a man or being that role is difficult for the first time, probably ever, where our roles have been changed and um our value as a man is, I don't want to say being devalued, but I do think there's been an effort in the last 30 or 40 years to focus on not a dominant male or what's referred to as masculinity. And
Yeah, no, I
and I don't know if that
completely.
had anything to do with his situation because I don't know
Well,
the
he was a,
particulars of what's going on. I
but
just can only speak for what I've experienced
yeah, yeah, but I
with
think it's safe to say, based on your observation, though, that he was a young man. So
yes, yes, he was in his
so
he was in, I believe, in his 30s, maybe 40s
and
at the time.
if he took his own life, then it was obviously difficult for him to be a young man. So I think there is a
Yeah,
connection there. How deeply and how specifically it might be connected is not ours to say, because
of course.
they're not
Yeah.
our family, and we want to stay respectful of the circumstances, not to
Hmm.
speculate. But I've got a son, I got brothers. I got
Hmm.
a dad who's 96. I got like four generations of men that I can look at and say, I see what it was like when my dad was a teenager. I see what it was
Yeah.
like when my brother was a teenager, when I was a teenager. And I got a grandson who's 9, and my son's 20, about to be 28. I got four generations to go, well,
Sure.
what
To
did this
reflect
look
on.
like?
Yeah.
And what does it look like now? That's experiential. That's not like
Hmm.
speculation, right?
Hmm.
And to your
Yeah.
point, I think that masculinity has become a bad word in the vernacular of too many people in the population.
Hmm.
And I think that distinction is this other phrase, toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic.
Hmm.
Masculinity can be toxic. Those are
Hmm.
two very different
Yeah.
statements.
But
And
they
I think
conveniently combine
masculinity,
the two. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
masculinity is human nature for a man. You
Yeah.
know, we grew up in caves, we hunted food, we brought food home, we fought battles, we protected our women, we gave birth to children and we took care of them and we put food in mouths. I mean,
Hmm.
these are not like made up circumstances. This is human nature.
Hmm.
And yeah, as we evolve and as we bring technology into things, these things change a little bit. But I
Hmm.
still open the door for women because it's my
Yeah.
nature,
Yeah.
and you can fault me for that if you want. But I
Yeah.
think it's gotten way out of hand. And I agree with your point. It's more difficult to be a young man today, particularly, than I think it's ever been.
Yeah. Mark, you shared some statistics about suicide uh, in relationship to males. Can you share that again? And let's
Yeah.
break that down, and then again we'll go through that. I thought
So
that was compelling, and it
it
puts.
was a LinkedIn post a couple days ago, and it was credible because it had sources that were cited, and I won't bore you with the sources, but it was entitled "The Silent Epidemic: The Inner Voice of a Man That Nobody Hears." And the first line: "The biggest killer of men under 45 is not cancer, heart disease, road accidents, or murder. It's suicide." Right? Thousands of
Wow.
fathers, sons, brothers, uncles, and friends decide they can no longer go on living. A rate of 60 men every minute of every day, 365 days a year. You know,
Wow.
I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
And that's
I
a
don't know.
recent that's recent statistics that was posted
Current.
on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's current. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a Dr. Gabor Mate who I'm familiar with. He's a
Mhm.
well-respected. I wouldn't call him a philosopher. He's kind of a holistic practitioner, but he's a well-respected source of wisdom. His quote is, "The loss of connection to ourselves is the greatest source of suffering."
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you've heard about the Harvard study of men and how connection to other people is the most important part of being happy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, this goes back to, like I said, what a man's contribution, is different. And sometimes it's in silence. But that word about the silence part, and just, yeah, going back to this conversation I had with this colleague that going through that, and I think that's what I was referring to. You know, it's he he did this because he didn't want to be here. This is depression. Depression is also very probably the highest it's ever been, right? Not men and women. This is not unique to men, but because anytime you've accelerated the point where you no longer want to be here or kill yourself, that's just another um, level of depression. It starts with a bad mood, a depression. You can't get out of it, and it just gets worse. And pretty soon you just can't. You don't want to be here. You can't be it. And I've as you know, that's how we met. I've experienced some depression for the first time in my life recently, or this has been a few years ago now. Man, it is really difficult to get out of that. And if you don't have self fortitude or self well, let's break these down. I think that's the purpose of having this conversation, and to have people around you, right, that keep you from hitting the complete bottom and not bouncing back. And that's also the guilt around the people that are the relationships, right? Did they do enough? Could they have prevented him from getting to that point? There's a
Hmm.
lot of guilt. There's a lot of shame, and that's worth talking about. But yeah, let's break these down. Internal strength. It's the personal strength of mind and emotional resilience that an individual cultivates within. So, what's your version of that, Mark? How do you see that applying to this?
Which particular concept, Jim? My internal strength?
Yeah, I'm just going off the description of what self fortitude means, and and they break it down in these four areas, right? Internal strength, self reliance, and internal resilience. Just
Yeah, I think that these. So my experience with mental illness is secondhand for the most part.
mhm,
I think the context is important. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm speaking about something that I don't understand. This is how I understand it. My mom took her own life.
mhm,
My daughter's lost a couple of good friends to suicide,
mhm,
and my brother has a few friends that have lost children to suicide. So
mhm.
in indirect and maybe a little bit of direct, because like I said about my mom, I don't diminish that, but it's different. She was almost 80 years old. She had lived her
Yeah,
life. She wasn't a young man or a young
it is
child.
different than like you said,
It's
a young
different.
man's
It's just
life. Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just different. But I think that what I do, first and foremost, is I acknowledge, and I wasn't always this way when I was
mhm,
younger and more immature. We were kind of, when we were young, mental illness was kind of like a really weird thing that only a few people had. And it was like
mhm,
mostly people just complaining about being sad, or we didn't treat it the way it needs to be treated, in my estimation. And now what we're doing is maybe overcompensating for that. And it's interesting because, mental illness comes up when you talk about what we're talking about, young men taking their lives. It's also like, and again, you say it all the time. I don't want to get political. This isn't political. It's like if you're a
mhm.
man and you think you're a woman, I think that's a mental illness. That's another,
Yeah,
and I think if you're going to go shoot up a school and you're a young man, that's a mental illness. And
mhm,
we don't want to bring mental illness to those discussions. We want to blame those things on something else. When I
mhm,
think if we gave the attention to mental illness that it deserves, and we spoke about it like you and I are speaking about it now, just plainly and raw,
mhm.
we might get somewhere because I think it's deserving of more attention. I think we could do more about it. And I think that we can talk about it more productively.
Yeah, and then to add to what you're saying, also humor. I believe we've become more serious about things, and especially if you don't have interaction. Like I'm speaking of physical human action, interaction at a local, I don't know, bar or a local restaurant. We've been so isolated. There's no question that that's contributing to this,
Yeah,
because there
yeah. I
was a
mean,
time when you
isolation.
could just laugh things off. There's something to say about being around like-minded people, laughing at the world or making humor of things in life, and there's a lot less of that. That's been my experience. I think it's a much more serious time and generation, which is kind of
Yeah,
sad because humor
yeah.
is a great painkiller.
Oh, it's the best medicine in the world, and I
Hmm.
probably overcompensate with humor. I've been accused
Yeah.
of that before. One of the things I was kind of smiling about as you talk, as you bring up
Mhm.
humor is one of the things that you haven't yet mentioned is the fact that this weekend you turned 60, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of funny that that hasn't come up yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I said I didn't celebrate. I chose not to have a celebration. I went to a 60th birthday a long time ago and said I never ever want a 60th birthday.
Yeah.
It's not a, but no, it was obviously a time of reflection, time of
Hmm.
a lot of gratitude. But I may do a roast and this summer because
I
I
want to come.
that's what everybody says. I get a lot of people. They get every time I mention that. Good friends like you start want it more than I actually want it. But again, I still need to finalize the date and everything. It would be this summer when the weather's better. But it's for that reason, right? I think we can laugh at life and make fun of life, and I think I would be a good. I'd
Be a
be an
good
easy one to make
subject.
some fun of. I've got some really good friends that I'm sure she got some materials. One of my friends was
Oh,
laughing, saying that there'd be people camping out days in advance just to get a spot to roast me. Uh,
you know what? You know what it reminds me of, Jim, is and it's related, but
yeah.
indirectly is they and I'll botch this paraphrase it is the funeral a funeral is not for the person who passed away. It's for
Hmm.
everyone who's now still around.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're talking about here in some way, shape, or form is regardless of this young man or other friends of ours or my mom or
Yeah.
whomever that's gone on and chose to take their own life because they were depressed, sad, mentally ill,
Yeah.
didn't want to be here. Everyone else is still around, and we have to figure out a way to have fun and enjoy
Hmm.
life moving
Yeah.
forward. And that's what they would want.
100%, and celebrate the moments and that you had with them, the
Yep.
funny moments.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, that, and just to add to what you're saying, and on a positive note too, one of these individuals that are close to, that's what they said as well, that received I don't know 100 deliveries of flowers and things, and how, and I went, how beautiful that is, that no matter what happens, that there was a moment where somebody, where you're still here, and then you can see how many people cared about you. And
Yeah.
if you hadn't experienced this terrible sickness or illness or whatever it is, you would have never been able to do that. So there's some really interesting twisted way of the beauty in this, and I do think it's related to the fortitude. If you have that positive
Totally.
attitude and you
Yeah.
see that there are good people. I also realize that everybody reacts different, right, to a sickness or an illness. You just never
Mhm.
know, and it doesn't mean that they don't care. Some people just don't know how to react, how to respond. They don't know what to
I
say.
don't think
Yeah,
most of us do. I certainly don't, and that's why I
yeah,
was really, really enchanted by
yeah,
your first line to this woman, which was, "Please forgive me for what I'm about to say." I think that's
mhm,
brilliant
yeah,
because, and I think everyone should. I'm going to use that. I'm using it
mhm,
next time I have the opportunity
yeah,
because you emote in that moment and you mean well. I think everyone
yeah,
means well, but what I've heard from people that have lost, as I did, um,
yeah,
I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want anyone's pity. I'm sick
yeah,
and tired of people asking me how I'm doing. I'm sick of it. And it's like,
mhm,
how do we be sensitive to that? Well, hey, let me apologize before I open my fucking mouth
yeah,
because
in
whatever it comes
advance.
out is it's well meaning, but
Mhm,
that doesn't mean you're going to like it. So I'm
mhm,
already apologizing. Please forgive me. I think it's
mhm.
brilliant.
Well, and the other, thank you for saying that, and the words that followed that was, he didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
just didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
And he's in a better place. You can take, somebody could get really angry, like, you motherfucker, how could you see it?
Yep. Yep.
I would understand that if she could have said that.
Totally.
On the other hand, I really feel that way, and I even said, um, this was related. He didn't want to be here. This is a depression is what led to this, right? He was depressed. He didn't want to be here.
Well, I
He's in a
think
better
the
spot now.
the things that, because I got like this kind of topic, kind of probably for everybody, gets your mind just racing. You start thinking about people that might be, inclined to maybe consider something like this. And
Yeah.
then, but to me, it's always in this. There's a few things that seem to be true to me, and they may not be true for everybody. They might not
Hmm.
even be true, but they're true for me.
Hmm.
And I don't even like my truth. This isn't. I believe this to be true,
Hmm.
which is, first of all, everyone responds differently,
That's
right?
right.
The
Yep.
fact of the matter is, no matter what you say, everyone else who did not take his own life is still living, and we need to pay attention to that. We
Hmm.
need to pay attention to the people that are still here. And
Yep.
then the third thing that pops into my head is some of these people that take their lives, perhaps many of them, I don't have any data, they're smiling and appear to be happy. They
Yeah.
don't put a face, they don't put the depressed mental ill face on for the public. So how do you know?
Hmm.
Right? And then
Wow.
the people that
Yep.
feel guilty that they could have done something else, no, you couldn't have. No one
Yeah.
could have, or they
Nobody
would
could have.
have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to end it, Mark. I appreciate saying that because, you know, people will have to deal with this when the world
Yeah,
deals, but
we're still here. Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's a great topic. I hope it was not too melancholy. I think it's
Yeah. I think,
important. I think everybody
yeah.
try to take something away that might help somebody else or yourself. It's just
Yeah.
like, because we're all experiencing this or about to. It's just life.
Yeah.
You know. All right,
Absolutely.
Jim.
So,
Thanks,
all
dude.
right.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you. All right.
All right.
I'll see you
See you.
next week.